forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa, you can make us see it your way. No way, gasoline and propane, more flames. Oh no, no more snowflakes.
We can all get along, but there's no stopping. Ay, everybody's wrong, that's a real problem. Ay, they don't want to hear it, but they still talking. Ay, soon enough, we running out of options. Ay, this ain't gonna end till it's in the coffin. Ay, we ain't gonna be friends till we try to squash it. Ay, I don't know how we can make amends or we drop it. Snowflakes melt when it's hot, kid.
Y'all are so fake. Oh no, the forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa, you can make us see it your way. No way, gasoline and propane, more flames. Oh no, no more snowflakes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you folks doing tonight? Welcome to HeartMind Expressions with the Fab Four. Mario's not going to be here this evening, so you're just going to be here with me, Dr. Bloom, and wonderful Sue McClure. How are you folks doing today?
Awesome. You know what? When it's just the three of us, it's Alex, Stu, and Sue. So
There you go.
I think that's
Got a good ring to it.
yeah.
so. I think that was the initial name, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was the original name of the show, actually, Alex, Stu, and Sue.
It's during our pilot episodes.
Yes.
There you go.
We're actually making up for lost time since we had, several months off on that.
Yeah. Well, I think we went well. So I guess we're going to be calling the segment that we've been doing right now the second part of the mind, body, and spirit section of things, I think.
Yeah. We're doing the body part. Yep. We were doing the Karens, which is kind of the socially,
Yeah. So mind, body, spirit, and social. I think they all work all together. So
yep.
We did
all
social. Now we're doing the body, and I think you were saying next week we'll be dealing with the mind,
and the spirit. Yep.
And maybe a little bit. We'll put a little bit of meditation in there, to get all of our vibes in check.
Oh yeah, that's Dr. Bloom right there. He's very good with the meditation sessions.
Sign me up.
All right.
So for the this is our body episode. So here's the thing. We are talking about not just intake for physical, but it also affects your mental as well. And a lot of people don't realize that they actually go together. I mean, everything just functions one way. It's kind of like the 6 a.m. morning traffic, sort of. And then when you go to bed, it's kind of like the 6 p.m. traffic. But anyway, so, and when we talk about fasting, even that doesn't always mean, people think fasting is just associated with food and drink, what you decide to take. Fasting also means maybe how much sunlight you're going to put, on yourself, like as you go outside. Fasting could also mean what you're willing to see. Like maybe you don't want to watch, bad things on TV or look at, unhealthy things on the internet and so forth. So it also, fasting could mean that. It's also think about what you say to people, what you also do. All of these are different terms of fasting. So when we talk about the body, so we'll start with the whole food dynamic. And in the old days, there was just so many different things what we ate throughout time. And it's just that we were led to believe it was just nuts and berries in the beginning. And then eventually meat was incorporated in, and then bread. And it's just that it kind of makes me wonder sometimes if actually the history of how a body handles food is actually wrong, because nowadays they let us to believe that if you eat naturally, you'll live longer. But back then they ate naturally, but then they claimed that they didn't live very long. And so we're supposed to live longer now because we eat naturally. How does that make any sense? What do you think about that, Dr. Bloom?
Well, yeah, I mean, longevity is it's a very interesting subject. And, looking at the studies, at least from the data that we have so far, It's interesting because the one of the best predictors of our longevity has nothing to do with the food that we eat. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with, whether we're eating diet food or regular food or whatever. Now, granted, those things obviously play a very big role, especially over time. But the number one predictor from the research I've seen on longevity has to do from an interpersonal nature. So here we are back to kind of the social, as we were mentioning earlier. And it's whether or not we feel connected with other people, you know, and we feel as though we're a part of a tribe and there's purpose in our life because of our connections that we have with others and the ability to kind of have people that we can fall back on when we're going through hard times. So, this idea of epigenetics, which means that we're not destined from the genes that we were given, but it's really our environment. The whole nature nurture argument. It's actually which one's more powerful? Well, the research is in, and it's the environment by a long shot. That we can turn on and off certain gene expressions in our body, whether or not cancer is going to proliferate or not. All of these sorts of things that we think are nothing more than biological bad gifts that we were given from a different generation genetically, and that's just not the case. And so, one of the biggest proponents of what we can do and have control over in regards to this environmental structure, obviously, stress plays a big role in our social connections and whatnot. But for purposes of tonight, is nutrition, right? The food that we eat. The food
Right.
that we eat, and I tell my clients this all the time, is literally a drug. It affects your neurochemistry, your gut health, how your body responds, just like medication does. So, as who was it? Aristotle, or one of the great philosophers of yesteryear, were saying that food is medicine. And so, this is such an important idea, especially as it pertains to this idea that, as we understand it now in modern science, there is a mind body connection. We've all heard that phrase before. That's a new kid on the block, relatively speaking. When you think about how old science is, at least as we gauge modern science, I'll put it that way, that we think well, it really wasn't until the 1950s that the mind and the body were somehow finally linked together with one another. Before that, for hundreds of years, we fell prey to Descartes in this Cartesian model that I think, therefore I am. And so our mind and our cognitions and whatnot, and how we live in this mental world is a completely separate model away from our body system. And starting in the 50s, when they were looking at stress, they realized, oh, wait a minute, actually, your stress levels do play an extremely significant role in how your body health responds. And so then that started adding more validity to psychology of saying, yeah, this is a very big deal. And in fact, this has a lot to do with your longevity, how your body works, the impact of, let's say panic attacks. Most of the time when you're having a panic attack, it's not based off of, a life or death situation. That what's happening is your mind is showing you pictures or having images come to your mind, or um, I don't know, little phrasings that our subconscious is telling us. We might not even be aware of it, but our mind is kind of rooted with our thoughts, and then over time that thought builds up energy to it, and then that energy then shows up as emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. So the thoughts spill over to our emotions, and that shows up in our body. So it's so important that we kind of understand this interplay, that the mind and the body affect one another very, very intimately. And so nutrition then plays a critical role here, because if we can change the food that we eat, if we're eating poorly, that then as we do that, you see a very significant boost in your mental health performance. And just to get up on a soapbox for a minute, it's such a shame that in these graduate programs all over the country, this is not taught at all. All of my knowledge base that I had, aside from maybe 1.5 to 2 lectures in one class of my entire 5 years of grad school, there's just no recognition to it. And yet, this plays such a critical role in terms of how we function. And there are certain authors that we can go over later that is a great starting point for people who are interested in kind of learning more about this. So now, Sue, I know that you had mentioned in the past there is a doctor fellow that you followed that talked a lot about kind of the foods that we should be eating and shouldn't be eating, and I think his name was Gundry.
Yeah, between Dr. Birdman and Dr. Gundry, they both almost sit on the
Birdman, yeah,
same scale. Both Birdman and Dr. Gundry, they kind of sit on the same scale. And the people who also wrote the books that has to do with eating for your blood type, they're all sitting basically in that same classroom. It's just their own version and intake of it. And I think it just depends on the kind of person that you are and what you can do. But one of the things I wanted to quickly touch on before we get to that is that one of the things, yes, mentally that helps you live longer is when you have things to look forward to every day. The people that live the longest always has something to look forward to, as the next day, rather than feeling like, well, it's the end. I guess it's time for me to just wait to die.
yeah,
Those kinds of people live less, and it just, um, believe it or not, a lot of people don't even realize this. A lot of people in the spiritual community knows this, but a lot of other people may not realize it. But the sun is food. Sunlight is food, and a lot of people don't realize that that's how it works for us. And there are some people that will go through the stream of this sun gazing and what we call the sun diet and all that. Just simply be outside 20 minutes right when the sun rises, so right at the crack of dawn, and you stand out there for 20 minutes gazing at the sun, and you do the same at the evening. So 20 minutes left of the sunlight before it totally goes into nightfall, you gaze at the sun. And in the ancient days, that's how they used to live for a very long time. That was that old ancient secret. Now, as for the food that you can and can't eat, number one thing that we have to realize is the food pyramid. The food pyramid is actually a lie. Now, some doctors have and people that study for food and everything, some doctors have turned the pyramid upside down. Some dietitians have taken the pyramid and turned it upside down and said maybe it's supposed to be this way.
right,
Actually, the one thing that's really supposed to be taken out of the food pyramid is bread. Even though we've seen bread throughout history, but that's how long the engineering is
right,
to train us in thinking that bread is actually okay. At the end of the day, bread really isn't one of the things that we are actually supposed to eat, even though it's an ancient food item. It's actually one of the food items that's supposed to make us live shorter and keep us in check. And one of the things is that we had our genetics tampered with so much by entities from a long time ago. And one of the tamperings they did was to shorten our lifespan, was to teach us how to keep it as short as possible. And do you want to explain exactly why they wanted to keep our lifespans as short as possible? Either one of you
Well,
want
Well,
to take?
I want to touch on really quick bread in a bit more depth.
Yeah,
So, one of the reasons why bread isn't good for our health, well, there's several. One
yeah.
of them is that simple sugars like carbohydrates, that these end up breaking down. And even though there isn't like, well, there is now lots of sugar in breads, but it's a carbohydrate. And so people say, oh, well, I'm thinking of when you go to the store and you find, let's say, snacks, right? And the snacks say fat free or sugar free or whatever. But you look at the carbohydrates that's listed in that product and it's through the roof. And the problem is
Yeah.
our body interprets as it's breaking down those carbs,
It's
it,
easy sugar.
it
Yep.
turns it
It's
into
just,
sugar.
right. It's the same as your bread actually has no different idea of a slice of bread versus 2 tablespoons of sugar. Believe it or not, a slice of bread does equal 2 tablespoons of sugar. It won't be able to tell the difference once it breaks it down.
Mhm.
And it doesn't like you eating sugar, let alone it doesn't like you eating bread.
Pasta noodles is a very similar process
Yeah.
as well. And the problem is, and this is the number one thing that I think needs to be a takeaway from this particular show as it pertains to nutrition, is that um, what happens is when we have sugar enter into our bloodstream, if this is the blood vessel, the problem is that sugar creates a rift as it's going down the blood vessel wall because the the particles are so large that they scrape against the wall. You know, like when you scrape your leg, like let's say a cat scratches you, and you look later, and it's all the scratches are bumped up. So that bumping up effect is called inflammation, and that's what happens on the inside of these blood vessel walls. So, as the inflammation increases from the continued poor diet choices over time, this blood vessel continues to constrict itself. And what happens when it constricts itself? It takes more pressure to have that blood and water and all those sorts of other particles there flow through. This is now what they're finding to be the source for reasons why there are blockages in our blood vessels. So, why that matters is because when the blockage goes to your heart, we call that a heart attack. When the blockage goes to your brain, we call that a stroke. And so now they're finding that there are huge correlations with inflammation, not just with death and poor diet choices and all of these kind of offshoots of chronic pain, et cetera, inflammation in terms of how it affects our autoimmune system. I mean, the list goes on. But now they're finding that inflammation has a very direct link with our mental health. And depression is one of the biggest ones. So there's a lot of discussion now of, for example, when you go see like a psychologist and you say, I've got some mental health struggles, I think I have depression. They don't say, okay, well, let's take your blood and do some paneling, and then we'll come back and see your blood scores and see whether or not you're at a threshold of whether or not you have clinical levels of depression. It's a psychosocial entity where you ask questions through a checklist. You've got symptoms. You've got your um, DSM here, which is how we diagnose. And so with that, my point is that now they're saying there might be more objective ways to gauge your levels of depression through inflammatory markers. And so now they're using this in a very interesting way to measure stress, to measure cancer signs before it escalates to any sort of like what we would then deem as having symptoms or an illness or whatnot. But so many of us are like pre-threshold because of our dietary choices or lifestyle choices, right? If we smoke or if we don't exercise, why does that matter? Because it's all related to inflammation. You see? So
Information doesn't mean your body actually visit puff up too. So I know that we are, some of us
like
can
the
be a little run
what was it?
around.
The New York
Yeah.
Stay Puff Marshmallow Man
Yeah.
from Ghostbusters.
No, I know. Well, he was completely made out of sugar, so that's his business there. But why if so we can go back to this other topic. So um of why was we genetically messed up with, to the point because a long time ago our species lived for 1,000 years or more, thousands
I
of
can
years. And so now we've been genetically screwed up to actually live maybe 100, a little bit more. So we want to talk about
so
that?
I can actually jump on. I can actually jump onto that a little bit.
Okay.
Uh, so when you talk about longevity, and if we go into kind of um the ancient history that is not talked about, we have what's considered you know socially acceptable history, and then you have a history which goes back much further, which can be very controversial depending on who's talking about it and the way it is
Call that
discussed.
rabbit hole history.
Yes, yes. um it also depends on um the point of view of how that story is told. So if we want to go to what could be considered more mainstream when it comes to grain and bread and stuff like that, um, if we go to cultures such as Rome or Greece or Mesopotamia, at that time, grain and wheat and bread were synonymously used as the food of the plebeian or the poor or of the lower class. And that's just because you could create a whole bunch of it and then you could distribute it. if you were to be part of the upper class, the wealthy, you would normally have a higher amount of meats and vegetables and of um, fats were very common. That's why if you looked at like photo news clips from the Gilded Age, which would be the 1890s, the well-off, the rich were normally obese. They were fat, and that's because they had that very rounded diet, versus a someone who was poor, learning that skinny and very malnourished. Because bread and grain, they're not very nutritious at the end of the day. They're meant to be, like as Dr. Bloom was saying, short bursts of energy, and then you crash at the end of the day because it's not a long-term energy source. Um, and actually, there's a very interesting first-hand account of this. Um, there was a story that was written during ancient China, and whereas a it was a um, this Chinese gentleman, I believe it was in the Ming Dynasty, um, and we had an army for this courier from Rome, and there was communication between the Roman Empire and the Chinese Empire at the time. Uh, the way it was written was saying that, well, the Roman Empire, the Roman military at the time, and it wasn't a very big army, which is enough for a envoy to come back and forth. And it said, well, the the armies are given bread and alcohol and wheat and some meat, and they're wonderful when it comes to fighting, but at the end of the day, when it comes to a long sustained fight, they eventually get exhausted very quickly because of the fact that they don't have long energy sources. Versus the Chinese and a lot of the Eastern cultures, they have this diet which is much more rounded versus it being grain dependent. You'll have higher amounts of meats or legumes or fruits, and fruits do have sugars in them. They have natural sugars within them, but they're a different type of sugar than, say, glucose that's produced from bread. And what you're noticing nowadays is that there are people that have developed sensitivities to bread, and this is called celiac disease. Um, and that's usually because of not just the constant use of bread, but also because of the amount of genetic manipulation that's been done within bread,
That's
with
exactly
wheat.
Yeah, especially when they
Um,
use the corn syrups and stuff, which they actually put that in every type of food nowadays to actually make sure it's extra poisoned, if you will.
right.
yeah. So it's and this manipulation's not just happened with bread, but that's just the one that's most common. I believe
Mm.
corn is another big one, and that's because I believe, if I remember correctly, and this is going back like 2011, and that's so that this is more than 10 years ago. They were saying at least 90% of corn is genetically modified,
Yeah.
versus it being organic. Or
Especially, yeah, especially the one that's got the white and yellow kernels together in that. That's the super sweet corn that was actually
but
lab made.
yeah, uh, super sweet because uh, sugar works just like cocaine in that aspect of it. It's highly addictive.
That's right.
Anything that is super sweet can be it can be just it's just like any other addiction. It will cause cravings. So that's why if you have a high carb diet, you're going to start getting cravings at the end of the day because
Yeah, the dye.
it's just pure sugar. Your body just
Right.
looks at it sugar. But
Yep.
So if
um
you get these cravings, in the middle of the night, you actually can control them by counterbalancing it. One of the ways you can counterbalance it is to actually eat something sour. I know this sounds crazy. It does work for me because whenever I get a little bit of sugar craving, I will actually, one of my favorite things I actually take is something a little bit salty. I just put a little bit of like a pink salt on the tip of my tongue and it goes away. Well, another thing that I actually do, I'm not a sugar person really, but I do like my noodles. So that's why I kind of had to stop eating that. But if I start having any pasta cravings, you can put a little bit of salt on the tip of your tongue. The other thing is you can put something tart and bitter, like mine is malt vinegar. I like malt vinegar. I usually eat it with fish. But you put a couple of dabs of that on your tongue, and that craving actually goes away, and you can move on with your day. So it's actually all up to you to actually control your cravings. You don't let them control you. That's also another ticket of the game.
So another thing, so that's more of a mainstream idea of what how history has done with bread and stuff like that. But when we talk about the longer lifespans, like you were saying, 1,000 years and stuff like that, well, you can go to some books like the Bible or the Veda, or you go to, I think, the Vedas. We'll also talk about these things and other forms of old documents because I don't know about you, but I consider them as much of a document as anything else. They're printed and manufactured so that can be spread to a wide audience just as much as anything else. But you'll hear about stories like, for instance, uh, if you go into the Christian Bible or the Jewish Bible, they talk about, Noah or Abraham or Ezekiel. But some of these gentlemen, they will be like 1,000 years old. Now, some of these people existed in what we may call the pre-Alluvian period, or before the flood, which that's where you get the Noah, and that's where you get a lot of the other topics that I'm probably not going to talk too much because it's kind of unrelated at this point. But you're going to notice that prior to the flood, of which it's still hotly debated exactly when that exactly happened. But prior to that flood, humanity had an excessively long lifespan. And there was something that happened that drastically cut it. We went from thousands of years old to having a maximum lifespan of just about 100. Humans can live up to 100 years old, sometimes longer, but not too much longer after that. It's very rare to hear somebody go beyond their 100th birthday. And it's even rarer to hear someone go um, past 102. But usually, a person, I believe the normal age of mortality is somewhere between, what was it? I think it's 75 to 90, if I remember correctly, roughly. Does
Yeah,
that sound about right?
that
Yeah,
would be more
75 to 90,
average. Yeah.
about average. Yeah, and that
yeah,
actually
92,
has
something
changed
like that.
depending on diet and uh, environment.
Yeah, yep. And here we are back to epigenetics. You can have someone who's um, fourth stage cancer. You can have someone whose entire family died from heart attacks when they were 50. You know, that there are so many factors that we have control over that we weren't told that we do. That's important for us to recognize from a place of empowerment. The biggest name that you can pay attention to in regards to epigenetics is Bruce Lipton, and that's because he's essentially the founder of this philosophy and this research. And it's just so empowering when we know that, because we move beyond the constraints of what we've been taught about longevity and youthfulness and how to just be vibrant and alive. And just the idea that, like, it's not that long ago that we are really kind of beginning to be on this new threshold of understanding gut health. We talk about, like, our brains having neurochemical reactions and whatnot, which is true. But at the same time, 90% of our serotonin receptors, serotonin is the feel good juice, as I tell clients sometimes, in our brain. It's the happy juice. It's what makes us feel kind of excited and have well being and kind of relaxed pleasure. That 90% of that production takes place in your gut, not in your head. So when they say you are what you eat, well, to some degree, because if you're eating poor food, that's affecting dramatically the gut lining of your intestines. then that's going to have marked and immediate results in terms of how you function. You know, if you go a week and you eat healthy that entire week, you juice, you stay away from the bad food, etc., and you pay attention to your concentration levels, your energy levels, your mood, your ability with memory and whatnot, and then you compare that to like a really crappy week where you're eating fast food and what's that called? The processed foods, you know, like on the side of the box, I call it grandma's rule. If you can't pronounce some of the words on that list, it shouldn't be going in your body. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't. I'm guilty of it too. But I'm saying in theory, it's important for us to be more mindful, at least, that if we're going to be eating cruddy, that at least we know what we're eating. You know, at least
Yeah.
we want to be able to have food that's still food. You know, you go to a
Right.
lot of these fast food chains or just all the guilty pleasures that we have living in this country. And most of it now, it's abysmal in terms of what the FDA has allowed to be classified as quote unquote food.
The FDA, in my opinion, really doesn't hold much of a stake of water for me. And it's just like holding water in a colander strainer. The FDA doesn't mean anything. They approved sugar at one point and they said it was healthy. They approved cigarettes and they said it was healthy. They approved of Coca Cola. They approved of all kinds of horrible stuff and deemed it as good for you, healthy, a okay, just fine. And then we find out later down the line that it's not healthy, great, a okay, or fine. So really, the FDA is a bunch of stock at the end of the day. Actually, they don't realize that people are smarter than they realize. You're smart enough to know what could go in your body because you actually have stuff in your body that tells you, as Dr. Moon says, feel good or feel bad. Your body's very good at telling you when you're thirsty. You don't need an app to tell you how much water you need to drink. When you're thirsty, you drink water. Your body's a very good indicator. The same thing is a good indicator to what you need to eat. It will tell you. It will tell you what you need to eat. If you kind of feel sleepy or tired or something, check to see what you eat. And that's why a lot of times they tell you to write down what you ate. So you can look back and say, oh, I ate a lot of bread this week, for example. That's kind of why I feel a bit crummy. Um, so it's not even just what you are, what you eat, but it's also if your gut is happy, the rest of your body will be happy. So yes, it all starts with your gut, in my opinion, as well. So
So, one thing that was actually kind of interesting, you mentioned the FDA when you talked about approval. One of the funny, interesting ones I like talking about is aspartame. That's one of my favorite ones to talk about.
oh my
Uh,
gosh, even caffeine was approved. The
well,
poisonous rat
that's
poison
that's
caffeine. Yeah,
that's not what I
aspartame
mean.
is bad.
That's not what I mean. Because aspartame, for a long time, was not approved by the FDA due to its massive amounts of um, health effects that it could cause,
Yeah.
a harm to the health. So when you introduce, I think it was Donald Rumsfeld, more quickly, he
It was.
became part of the FDA.
That's right.
Automatically, all that research didn't mean anything. All of a sudden, overnight almost, it became approved. It's this wonderful thing. It's a sugar substitute. It's going to get rid of sugar dependence, and we will have not worry about sugar at all. We can have things that are sugar free because now we don't have to have. We can have the substitute, which is technically not sugar, but it acts like sugar, but it's not sugar.
Well, as Dr. Bloom has said, the anybody that works under the government guys and any type of Big Brother guys, it looks and sounds great on the surface, but underneath there's a catch to it. There's always a link chain and catch to it. What do you guys think of that? You agree?
Hmm.
Disagree?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's how they work, right? To
Yeah, they're good at
sell,
making things sound good.
to sell the poison pill, they have to lace it in sugar so it goes down smooth. You know,
spoonful of sugar lets the medicine go down.
yeah,
That's
you
the
know,
thing.
a spoonful of Marxism helps the communism go down.
There's a good way to
There's
put
a
it. Good
meme right
job.
there.
Awesome.
Or
Yeah.
what about
Oh,
democratic
Tadwin.
socialism?
What about what?
What about democratic socialism?
Ooh, yeah.
That sounds
Democratic
fabulous.
socialism helps the communism go down. Helps
Oh,
cognitive dissonance go down. How about that?
I like that. It lets the depersonation and the deperson agenda go down. You have been depersoned. Sorry, comrade. Anyway, but that's that's just the thing about that. Um, not all things that are promoted are good. In fact, there was this rule that I learned when I was younger, which is if it looks smart, if it looks shiny and it's being pushed and advertised in mass, it's usually not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just have to do with groceries, that has to do with anything, anything whatsoever. If it is pushed and pushed and pushed, it usually means that they're trying to get it off their hands and into your pocketbook.
Yep.
And into your body. If you can believe it, guys, you can look it up. Listerine used to be a floor cleaner, and somehow I believe they added a little bit of sugar flavoring to it, and they call it mouthwash.
Wow.
So
Oh,
yes,
also when it comes to Listerine, it was the Listerine company that coined the term halitosis.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Halitosis is a patented word by Listerine
Wow.
because there was no actual word for bad breath. We just called it bad breath. There was no need for a term. So when they started advertising Listerine as a mouthwash, they said, "Do you want to have halitosis?"
Hmm.
And it just sounded like this horrible, like, what's halitosis? It sounds like an infectious disease or something.
Right.
Just bad breath. That's all it is, bad breath.
Huh.
But you can deal with bad breath pretty easily if you have things like spearmint or other forms of mint because they have the essential oils and they naturally neutralize poor smells.
But a lot of times, the reason why you have bad breath is because of your gut as well.
That's true.
Exactly.
And I have noticed me in the past, and I will say that I have actually did what's called a mint spearmint test, and they can actually tell how good and how bad your gut really is. If you whop down at least 5 different mints, that includes the mint leaves and the oils, drink water on top of it, and if somehow your breath magically still smells awful, then there's something wrong with your gut.
Hmm.
If you can actually take chew on a couple of mint leaves, take a mint tablet or some sort of mint oil, and your breath starts to smell good, then you're fine.
Huh.
There's
Oh,
your test.
just be careful with that because if you mint oil can burn pretty badly if it's not done properly.
Oh yeah,
But,
absolutely.
you know,
You don't want to do anything in full power. That's why I say a couple of mint leaves is fine. You have it grind up and you have it with water. You just drink it. And if your breath doesn't freshen up and it still smells horrible, then there's something wrong with your gut.
oh, just
It also
just
does
taking
help
that.
aid with indigestion too once in a while. But like I said, you don't want to take the full smack of it.
I'm just saying that from experience. You don't want to. Back when Listerine introduced their fresh strips and all, you know, you got so many
Remember that.
kids my age when they first came out. They would eat the whole thing, and they would like, "Why is this burning?" And it's like, it's concentrated Listerine that you just put
Yeah.
on your mouth and on your tongue, and you're wondering why it's
When I
burning.
first got those, I used to actually lick them and stick them on the bathroom mirrors. I was fascinated they could stick.
That's cool.
Only you, Sue. That sounds fascinating.
Remember when Altoids came out? That was like all the rage when I was a kid.
Yeah, boy, that stuff was
Yeah, I
fun.
remember Altoids.
Yeah, and then I used to save the box, and that's why I used to put coins in them. Do you guys remember ever doing that, or put little
Oh yeah.
trinkets of things in there? You would save the box and
You'd
put
see
stuff
the
in there.
things everywhere.
Yes.
I did do. I didn't use that, but I did use Royal Dank's cookies for sewing equipment.
That's funny.
I know that's yeah, those cookies, those butter
Yeah,
sugar cookies.
the
Oh
butter.
yeah.
Yes, the Royal
Yeah.
Dank's butter cookies in the round tin.
I know,
Oh, yeah.
I know. People actually get stunned when they open it, hoping for cookies, and there's a bunch of needle thread in there.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Anyway,
I know. Why do we have that? I'm guilty of that. I actually use mine as a sewing kit too. So I have no room to talk. Uh so yeah, so we talk about different things about food and how they how they interact with our bodies. So you mentioned earlier about juicing. Why is juicing so important versus we can just take our food and chew it? All the fruits and vegetables. What makes juicing more important than eating it solid and whole
Oh,
versus running
good
it through a
question.
machine?
Good question. So, I have a Vitamix, and I'm not one to promote any product. But what I like about this particular machine is that the way in which how finely it chops up the ingredients, that what happens is it rips through the cell walls, which is where all the nutrients is housed. And after it does that, it unlocks all the nutrients. So it's ready for us to drink. That's why when I drink it, I feel like $1 million within, I don't know, 30 seconds to 2 minutes. My energy level just skyrockets when I juice through my Vitamix. And when we eat, what happens is we're not able to chew enough to get the particles as finely chopped up. And so we leave that to our digestive system to do that work. And the problem is when we do that, we are not we are putting so much strain and effort on the digestive system that it's not going to be able to break it down as much as if we had already done that, because when we already do that, then it goes into our gut and then it kind of seeps in more directly, so we're getting more of a higher percentage of the nutrients. And when we break it down the traditional way, those cell walls aren't crushed open as much, and so a lot of it is then flushed out when we go to the bathroom. And so this is why, at least me personally, why I get the vast majority of my vegetables through juicing. So I still eat salads and whatnot, and try to eat fruit and veggies, and just kind of do that on my own, because I like the little cold cuts and everything. But nothing affects my health more so in terms of the effects that I feel as much as when I juice. Now, I use a blender to juice. My girlfriend, she uses more of the traditional um, food processor, where you kind of pour it down and it kind of smooshes it together. And then you don't eat the fibrous parts. It just shows you, it just has the juice that you drink. Now, for me, I don't like that as much, because all of that extra fiber ends up being thrown away. And it's really 90% of the nutrients is found in the fiber itself. And so this is the nature's broom aspect as well, that kind of sweeps the colon and has things cleared out. Otherwise, you're on Metamucil or some other sort of like synthetic fiber that isn't good for you, you know? So nature is the best way to go. But I think the biggest takeaway is that every person has to experiment for themselves. What works for me? Because what works for me might not be the same thing that's going to work for Susie or Billy or Sally. And so when I intuitive eating is now a big buzz phrase that we see everywhere. And even in the psychology world, intuitive eating is now what's often kind of used even with like eating disorders and whatnot, mindful eating and all of that sort of stuff. And being able to get in touch with our intuitive powers. We all have it. It's just lying dormant because we're not taught how to use it. This is the main reason why I'm even writing my book and finishing it up right now, because there are skills that psychology teaches that it's such a sin that we are not taught this in grade school. We don't think about thinking. We don't think about our thoughts. We don't think about how to craft a phrase to have the other person kind of have it be received well. If that's not taught to us, and we're kind of learning all of these, memorizing, in forms of math, or I don't know, history dates with wars and whatnot, and yet the practical things of life are not being taught. So that's my little soapbox moment. And now I lost my train of thought.
Well, what I wanted to, I'll give you a chance to get yourself back on the tracks if you find it. Um, Probably use a searchlight. But how about we kind of switch gears just a little bit, and we will talk about what actually is, what actually is in terms of poison. And actually, we have been taught, like I said, the pyramid is actually wrong. You really should just toss the pyramid out completely, because we were actually taught certain foods that are actually healthy, and it's not. They would say they would mark it, and as you have said, if it's pushed and pushed and pushed constantly, then there's a good chance that it isn't the best for you. And like there's certain fruits and vegetables that you see when you see the commercials, and they show different types of fruits on their commercial. There's a point why they pick those specific types of fruits, specific types of vegetables when they advertise their stores, or when they advertise certain pills, tablets, or anything that has to do with dieting. It is because they have a market to push for certain types of food items, and they're getting paid. They're saying, well, if you put banana in there, we'll give you extra money. If you put these certain types of fruits and vegetables, your commercial will get extra. And it's just one of those sneaky ways that the bad guys, the deep state members that put it, has pushed these things, and it's constantly into the mainstream of politicians. They do kind of play a role into getting into our business with the food market. And it's all kind of was one big circle, one big happy family in order to make us miserable. They do have meetings on how to make people miserable, believe it or not.
Mm.
So here's some of the things, like for example, tomato is actually a poisonous food. And but however, you can lessen the poison by taking the skin off by boiling the tomato, and which is shocking in cold water. You score it first. You score the tomato, and you put it in boiling water for just about 30 seconds. You take it out and you put it in a bowl of ice water, and you take the tip side of your knife and peel off the skin. Then what you need to do is you cut the tomato in half and scoop out all the seeds. All the seeds and all the guts and all the slimy stuff is poisonous to us. Now, if you take those out and just eat the bare tomato itself, it's okay. It's still not good. But here's one of the things: tomato, along with other types of fruits and vegetables, is actually what the cause of arthritis. It's actually the cause of our muscles hurting like crazy. When you get out of bed, when you get out of a chair, you kind of feel achy at first, but then you get moving, you feel a little better. It is the reason for that. When you eat legumes and nightshades, those things actually hurt you. And they're the reasons why you have arthritis or just aches and pains. You think you're getting old, but it's actually your body's actually telling you that it's getting tired of you eating that. So I found that when I stopped eating tomatoes, for example, um, I was actually able to move my body parts a heck of a lot better. And I thought I was hurting because I was just getting older. And I find out that if you stop these certain foods, you will stop hurting.
Now,
And what's the operative word there? Why?
Yeah.
What's the theme between nightshades and lectins and tomatoes, seeds, and all these sorts of things?
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
or not? What was the word? Not lectins, but that
Legumes.
is the
Yeah.
legumes. Thank you. It's
Yeah.
lectins, right? Lectins are poison. It's what the vegetables have to put out there as a protection against all the birds and nature life that wants to eat them. So if the animal's getting sick, then it's going to realize, hey, I probably shouldn't eat the tomato out of Sue's garden anymore because it made me so upset. So the problem is those natural defenses and poisons that are baked in there for natural predators. Well, guess what? We're a natural predator too. And it's small, it's death by a thousand cuts. But when we have this kind of lectin buildup, that's what
Yeah.
creates all these things. At least that's Gundry's argument.
Yeah.
well, the other thing that's kind of interesting, and I'm just going to kind of blow people's minds. You're talking about bananas, right? Most people consider a banana like a fruit of some type. Technically speaking, it's a berry. It's more related to a
Yeah.
berry. But and tomatoes are nightshades,
Yeah.
and peanuts are not peanuts. They're not a nut. They're actually a legume. And
Yeah.
notice that
And
they
it's
are
actually
the
a
most
poisonous lagoon. Yeah, they're very
That's right.
poisonous.
they're the most commonly used legume in nut mixes.
Yeah.
Right? It's not usually almonds or cashews or walnuts or Brazil nuts. It's going to be peanuts, which are going to be the largest number of it. And speaking of poison and toxin, I mean, going back to peanuts, what is one of the most commonly gotten food allergy? It's a nut
Yeah.
allergy. Peanuts
Right.
primarily. So that's right now. That's just showing nature's just saying, hey, don't eat that.
Yeah.
Or you could also have lactose intolerance, and that's because humans are the only one of the very few species that drink milk of another animal.
That's right.
Yeah, I think technically we
Lactose,
should be making cheese with breast milk. I'm wondering.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I bet people have done it.
Yeah,
Don't
they
get me wrong.
have. They have actually have taken breast milk and powdered it. They cheesed it. You can actually buy it to where you can sprinkle it on food and stuff like that. It's just people feel weirded out by it though, for some reason. And
Oh, yeah.
that's our human stuff. I mean, we should feel more weirded out having the cow stuff.
Or the goat.
Yeah,
Well, you know a lot of
Right?
how that started. You know how milk cartons that they had in school, that
yeah,
began after World War One, when there was such an excess of milk from the troops, they didn't know what to do with it. And so they said, well, we'll just shove it in the schools. And so the dairy industry is one of the most powerful in Washington. Dairy and there's another one from a food product. I don't remember what it is offhand, but those two
I
are, yeah. Do you remember
think
what it is?
it's milk, and I think it's the regular. I think it's the meat industry
Could be the meat industry.
because I
But
know they're
in the
because I
top
think
tier,
yeah, I
yeah,
think
go
it's the
ahead.
meat because there's only three major companies when it comes to poultry.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well,
So I
they
think that
they they had led us to believe. You can remember all the commercials in the old days, how they talk about does your body great, it makes your bones, wonderful and everything. Actually, it does the opposite. And even Dr. Gundry has talked about that too. That even and a lot of other people has talked about that. Actually, milk is at the end of the day really not that good for you when we're talking about cow's milk. If you really want milk that badly, you're better off still trying to get it from mama. She still lactates. Consider yourself lucky. But no, seriously though.
Well, and milk is extremely inflammatory.
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons why, because we weren't meant to drink it the way we drink it. You don't go and just randomly say, "I'd like a calf's milk, please." You know,
yeah.
um, it's meant for the calf. You know, and so there's just so much that we have been deceived by, all in the name of greed and money, and these big power industries that take place in Washington. And then all we see is just the repercussions of them when they have those. Remember the milk commercials from the 80s, like milk does a body
Yeah,
good,
yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
all of that, right? That you see that, and it's just so insidious that we buy into this. What
And
was
as
the big
I don't
got
remember
milk?
the
Remember got milk?
I wasn't alive in the '80s.
Well, even in the 90s, it continued with the Got Milk series.
Yeah,
yeah.
Um,
I know.
and so,
It was a joke.
like
Also, sorry.
with all of this, it's just so sad to see once you start waking up of how badly we've been deceived by all of this.
Yeah,
You know,
and they decided to push it by doing the milk. And remember how we just talked about the carbs that were bad for you? Well, what did they do with the milk and the
yeah,
carbs? It's called cereal. We have it for breakfast in the
yeah,
morning. It's
yeah,
one of the most common breakfasts to have. It's the whole milk and cereal. They want to basically start your day with poison, but of course they're not going to say that.
yeah,
No, it's probably
yeah.
better to have a diet of fats are actually probably better because it has the long sustaining energy. Like prior
Mhm.
to cereal being the main thing, I mean, when you think of the Great American Breakfast, it was usually eggs, bacon, and maybe a side of toast. Oh,
And a cup at most of freshly squeezed orange juice. And now
yeah.
we have the synthetic juice
Oh my
that's
gosh, don't get me started on
right.
that. Wow.
They add artificial
Yeah.
colors and flavorings and everything. What's what I'm looking for that adds to like the longevity of the juice. And with all of that, it's
Oh, you're
not
talking like
only not
preservatives?
pure juice, preservatives. Thank you.
Well, what
But
they
not only is
yeah.
it not, but the other real piece here is that they add sugar. And so you're not drinking like a little thing of orange juice. You're drinking like a huge tall glass, like they show in the commercials, and it's all synthetic.
Yeah. Well, actually, what they do is they take the oranges and they squeeze all the juice out of it, and they can sit in a holding tank up to a year. And since they sucked all the pretty much a majority of the water and everything out of it and it's preserved in its holding tank, it literally has no flavor. So what they do, they add water, they add sugar and all kinds of flavorings back in it. Otherwise, it tastes like nothing.
Yeah.
So and that's what makes it so awful. So yes, you if you really want orange juice badly enough, you are better squeezing it yourself. Or nowadays, some of the grocery stores, my grocery store does it, where they actually will squeeze it right in front of you. They actually have a machine in there, and it will actually make orange juice on demand. And they bottle it for you, and they just give it to you straight as is. And that would be the best way to get it if you really want to take that route. But just remember, it still
there's
has all these sugar in it, so it's you have to be careful how much you drink.
there's actually there's a device that I saw that's in a German supermarket, and it's a juicing machine. All right, all you got to do is put the fruits that you want. You put it into the machine. It will juice it for you, and it comes out in a bottle. So
Yeah.
you have to fresh squeezed juice right then and there,
Hmm.
just like the way you're saying it, so.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's about what my store does. So they will actually put it together for you. You can even order like certain juice mix together. One of them's sort of like a green machine type of juice, like different various green vegetables. And I think pear was actually one of the things that was put in with it. So, but like I said, we do have to be careful what we eat because if you see things that gets pushed heavily, that's probably a bad sign. You're not supposed to be eating it or drinking it or touching it whatsoever.
Mhm.
And so, the biggest hunt down is what are we allowed to eat? A majority of the foods that we are allowed to eat is greens. Believe it or not, certain types of nuts, walnuts, what's on the list is one of them. Um, I believe, what was it?
Just type in
Pine nuts, yeah, pine nuts is another one. I mean, there's a handful of nuts that we can eat. All the berries is a list of things you can eat. That's strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. So there are things that we are allowed to eat that are best for us. We have to be careful of the fruits though, because fruits do play an effect on our body, especially the berries. They trick our body into storing for fat because when you eat certain types of foods, it claims your body is basically doing the hibernate, store up the fat for the winter thing. So your body is playing out the seasonal game. So you have to be kind of careful what you eat as well for that. So make sure you eat within season.
Yep. And you can just type into your search engine, Dr. Gundry, Gundry, and then type in yes and bad foods. And there'll
Mhm.
be a checklist that comes up with a list of the good foods and the ones to avoid that have the
Yep. So,
lectin.
yep. There's the yes and no list. It's very printable, and you can take it to the grocery store with you and kind of help you shop for different types of food items. That and he actually got your Gundry also if you're kind of baffled on how to prepare your meals because it is a different way of thinking. Um, he has cookbooks that you can purchase and it kind of helps your brain getting started into going into that mode in that direction and you just slowly train yourself into thinking that way. So my husband is using Dr. Gundry's method, and he started out with a weight of 209 pounds, and he is now 150.
Wow.
And he's actually been at this for about 10 months. It took him 10 months to get there. So he looks great. He's I had to we have to keep buying him new belts and pants. That's the only drawback. You have to keep changing your wardrobe.
That's funny. Well, good on him. That's great.
Yes, he's doing great. He's absolutely doing wonderful. Um, and it's a trial and error thing. Even as for me now, we can't compare each other for the diets that we do. You can't compare between gender. Do you want to get in a few seconds of talking about why it's different that male and females have to play the diet game differently with each other? Because I'm pretty much on the same diet as my husband. We eat the same things. We eat the same amount of foods. We're almost similar in height. I'm actually only 4'7.5". So when I say I'm small enough to hang glide a Dorito, don't eat it. Use it for hang gliding. I'm not kidding. But and yeah. So but and he's like I think 5'1", 5'2", something like that. So yeah, he's pretty short. So and it talks about that I'm on the same thing, and yet I'm not losing my weight as quickly. So we're starting to realize that sometimes calories can play in a role for certain people. And so we just recently have gotten into this whole calorie count. A lot of times that may not be best, but it's not for everyone. Um, but since I'm really tiny and I have a habit of eating more food than I need to, we found out that I can actually live just fine off of 800 to 900 calories. Now, that's not recommended for everyone, and it can be considered a dangerous calorie count to live off of. So that's just something you have to talk to your doctor about. But Dr. Bloom, do you want to talk about, and Alex, if you guys want to talk about why can't men and women compare each other when it comes to nutrition, diet, and lifestyles?
Well, I'll say a few words. I think part of it is hormones differences. Part of it is, uh, for men and women, you have like the pear versus the apple. And so even in terms of shape, so even within a particular sex, you're going to have differences in terms of how the weight is distributed. But generally, women carry it around their hips, and men carry it in their stomachs. And stomachs is particularly dangerous for the heart. But there's more variables than even sex. So a big one, of course, is like what we had briefly mentioned earlier with blood type. You know, and there's a lot of variables kind of at play here, and this is why if you can really find a good nutritionalist, a branch of medicine that I recommend is called functional medicine, and there's a big name behind this called Mark Hyman, Hyman, and he's written prolifically. He's on TV all the time, and he's got great blog articles, and he's on YouTube and just everywhere. And one book in particular stands out. It's called The Ultra Mind Solution. And here he goes chapter by chapter, kind of talking about the different foods to eat. And if you're struggling with any particular health condition like depression or anxiety or bipolar, what you can eat to kind of like help or hinder with those symptoms. So functional medicine is kind of like naturopathic care in that it goes upstream to kind of look at the cause and not just the symptoms or the reaction downstream. And so that's definitely one approach that I would recommend kind of researching to see if that resonates with folks, to look at things from a well-rounded point of view. And Gundry, of course, he's a great resource. We had mentioned earlier John Bergman. He's a chiropractor, but he has lectures on YouTube, and he's written several books. One is How to Reverse Arthritis Naturally, and he has one about like what items to buy when you go to the grocery store and whatnot. And anyway, can't recommend him enough. Just type his name into YouTube, and he's got lectures on almost any health condition you can think of. I was watching a clip from one the other night, and he was saying at night when you snore and you kind of just a little bit like that. The reason why that snoring is happening is because you have a bone behind, or a bone or a muscle or ligament or something behind your ear that has been like, his word wasn't this, but essentially deflated. And that if you can do particular exercises to get the strength of that, whatever it is behind your ear, worked up again, then it stops snoring. Well, I've never heard that in my life. All we hear about is all these devices and things that you need to do in order to work with, your CPAP machine and
Yeah.
all these conditions and everything. And so he does that for everything, for cancer, the list goes on. My point is, check him out because you won't be led astray. So Mark Hyman, John Bergman, and I
Dr.
think that was
Gundry.
it. Do you remember the
Yeah,
author
Dr.
for
Gundry.
Blood
Yeah.
Types
The
book?
blood types? No, I don't have the book on hand. I'm sorry. But you can look, Eating for Your Blood Type is the name of the title. And you can either buy the entire book. I think they have one solid book that has all the blood types. And then they have separate books where it has separate blood types. They also have shopping list and cookbooks as well. So I think all the doctors actually basically have cookbook suggestions and shopping list suggestions to help get your thinking to point in that direction of how to proceed and how you want to put your meals together. But at the end of a day, you want to go as natural and close to the earth as possible. And you want to try to eat. And it's really, really hard because nowadays, the Food and Drug Administration has changed how organic is organic. It used to be that the ground in the system has to be cleaned for 7 years. I mean, 7 years of any kind of, pesticides and things like that in the dirt and all that. And I think they just approved and changed it within the last few years to 3 or something like that. And that's not enough to clean the ground, is to put it and have the dirt in the fields ready to plant the next batch. So, and it's really, really hard to do organic food because even you as a farmer, um, tries to make everything organic as possible. We still have the chemtrails and the chemtrails just there to get it dispersed in the air, and it can disperse in the rain and all that, and it can still make your food non-organic because of all the pesticides and everything that's in the air and the water. So that's really hard, and it kind of branches on to the whole thing about the fluoride in the water. We have natural fluoride and we have man-made fluoride, which is the fluoride that they used in the Germany time and stuff. And yeah, and they did that to actually dumb you down, make you docile, make you tired, and you just will just comply with anything because it will just be easier. The one of the things
They
they don't
use
want,
the concentration camps.
yeah, and so they want to make um so they want to that's the reason why when they say the Food and Drug Administration, they weren't kidding that they work together, they're in bed together, they shake hands together, they screw each other in order to screw us. So we have to actually be diligent to
Sometimes quite
realizing
literally.
that so we have to be diligent to thinking about what we put in our bodies and ignore the propaganda stuff that we see and hear on TV. And that's it goes all the way back to thinking for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're original prints of ourselves. And so if we're original prince, then we have our own body with our own rules. So we know the best. And we have talked about even next week, we'll talk about the mind and the spiritual side, but I'll touch on it slightly that we actually have something called a higher self. And our higher self, more than anything, knows what we need and what we don't need. So believe it or not, you can actually, one of the meditation techniques is you can sit at a round table and put all your organs in the seating like King Arthur in a round table. You put all your organs and all your body parts sitting in their own seat, and you meditate and you ask them one by one, what do you need? What can I do to help you? Are you feeling well? What do I do to make you better? And you can actually ask yourself, because you and your higher self knows best what you need.
Mhm. Well, um, I just wanted to quickly go back to the whole losing weight management with men and
Yeah,
women real quickly.
sure,
I'm
absolutely.
not going to be I'm not going to be as eloquent with it. I
Oh,
apologize
but
for
you're
my
still
my
awesome anyway.
but just from a biological standpoint, men and women are designed differently. Women are designed for fat retention, and that has to do with the fact that women are childbearers, and so fat is meant to
And not
it's
birthing people.
not perfect, yes, but it's a it's part of sexual dimorphism because actually fat on a woman is designed as a form of as an attraction. Honestly, if you go into how attraction is done through the natural world, bearing children is a pretty big thing when it comes to men when they want to continue the race, if you will. So that's one thing. Um, but besides that, with men, men can drop weight pretty quickly because of muscle mass, because fat um, is burned faster than muscle. Muscle is much more robust. It burns much faster, burns things much faster than just raw fat. And the other thing I wanted to touch was was when you were talking about fluoride. There is a reason why they tell you that you have to was it, I think it was your 10 cups of water every day. With fluoridization. Uh, just imagine how much you're getting with that, and the fact that you brush your teeth. Most toothpastes will have fluoride, and
Take a
there is
shower in
actually
it. Remember, your skin's the biggest organ.
shower. It
Yeah,
just it's everywhere. Drink it.
yeah.
Um, but there are actual conditions for that. There is a condition called fluorosis, and fluorosis actually is uh, your teeth rotting due to the high concentrations of fluoride. In fact, if you go into many scientific studies, you'll find out that fluoride is a neurotoxin at its
Right.
base. I
Right.
mean, we know about mercury, we know about lead. Fluoride is not that much better, and that's why there is I think it's the approval of how much fluoride you're allowed is only a few microns, if I remember correctly. It's not that much whatsoever, because if you go any higher than that, you're going to start risking fluoride toxicity.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean that's again, this is what it means. If you watch TV and you see the ads and see how much they're pushing these things, they constantly push the word fluoride constantly on TV. Your dentist talks about it to death. The TV talks about it to death. Commercials are on it all the time. It's on every label of toothpaste, and that's why if you buy non-fluoride toothpaste, you're better off. You don't need it, and it actually makes your teeth rot. It's also your teeth rotting also is due to poor diet as well. And if
Oh,
David Wilcock talked about this too. You can look him up. He's done a video on it. But if you look at people who live in blue zones, you look at people who live that in worlds and villages that has been untouched by the modern world, they have absolutely perfect teeth. They don't have dentists, and they certainly don't have toothpaste. A lot of them actually use a rag to wipe their teeth down. Um, Otherwise, it's actually due to your diet. Your teeth is actually based on your diet more than anything in the world. So I'm not saying don't brush your teeth, but what I am saying is that that we have been deceived and we have been lied to. They make it sound like that you need to brush your teeth with fluoride, go to the dentist and add some more fluoride into your, onto your teeth. They put this little pasty stuff and all that stuff, and all that is doing is keeping the dentist industry in business. That's it.
There's a great
so
book called The
that's one thing.
Fluoride Deception that talks all about this. Highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, it's very good.
The one thing that's kind of interesting about toothpaste is
Yeah.
if you look at the back of a toothpaste tube, there are two things you're going to notice. One is the colored strip on the tail end of the tube. Now, depending on what color it is, determines if it is natural, if it is have additives put into it, or I think the other one is that it's just mass produced. Forgot exactly how the code works, but you're going to see green, red, or black, and they all have different color codes, and then they actually correspond to um, anything that would be associated with like a nutritional label, if you will. The second thing about it is there's a on it. It will say "Do not swallow." Right
Right.
now, if you look at say a non-fluoride toothpaste, like let's say you want to get Tom's toothpaste or something like that, and some of those toothpaste, like I actually have one that's not doesn't have fluoride in it. It doesn't have that warning, and that's because of the fluoride in it. And that's the only reason why they have to have that is because of the uh, how toxic that stuff is.
That's right.
If you have a
So,
regular
and yet they're
natural,
telling us that, I know they want us to swallow water.
well, yeah, water's a little bit better, but it's much better if it's defluorinated. It's
Okay.
defluorinated.
Yeah.
Actually, that's kind of nice because there actually is a very big national debate happening right now, which is fluorination of public water sources necessary?
Let's hope
Because
they get rid of it.
I know right now in my town we're talking about that pretty uh, actively at this moment because there is a contract coming up soon, and that contract has to do with uh, waste and water and um, how it's being done in treatment plants and all these other things that are interconnected with one another.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I wish you town the best of luck on that one.
I don't think that's going to be resolved anytime soon. This has been something
Yeah.
that's been a longly debated topic. You know, they bring
Well,
out these
that.
qual. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Oh, I'll talk next. Go ahead.
No, it's just these are most towns will have these water quality tests, and they'll say, well, this is what our sample says for this year, and this is what the ingredients that we found. We found, like, say, this amount of fluoride, this amount of chlorine, this amount of carbon, you know, and they'll be like, well, this is safe to drink, or this is not safe to drink, and then they'll give a much more complicated breakdown after that. Um, and this is any place that deal with water. So any town
Now
you can probably look these things up.
let me add on to that. What is our largest organ on our body?
Yeah, so skin.
Skin.
Yeah.
Skin, right?
And so as I was talking about that, that's in the shower water and stuff. So
Yep.
as I was mentioning earlier, and so and here's the thing. It's just that, like I said, everything has been linked to poisoning us as much as they possibly can. And so, there are ways to actually combat these things. However, unfortunately, they do cost. But you can get a system put in your house so that when you drink your tap water, take your shower, and any water that comes out of any form of your tap, you don't have to worry about it. It will take care of the fluoride as you filter it out. But it does cost to have that system put in. I wish we could do that. But I know they sell shower heads. Dr. Bloom, you have talked about how they sell different types of shower heads that combat some of this.
Yeah, exactly. Um, oh, what's his name? There's a guy on the internet. He's like the number one top alternative doctor on the internet. He's on YouTube. He's got his own blog for like 30 years. Like he's everywhere. Um, I'm escaping his name. Anyway, he does reviews over products. And so he talked about various shower head products that you can put on that do filtering with this. So if you live in a place that has, dirty water or heavy water and whatnot, you can put one of these things on and I just think it's important to keep perspective because there's so much of an emphasis that we have on what we consume consciously, like through the water we drink. But what about the water we bathe in? You know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, the water that we use to brush our teeth with.
So
Mm.
I use a filtration system device by a brand name called Berkey, Berkey, and I swear by it, and I love it. I was reading reviews on Amazon about this, and I wasn't sure which company to buy. And then I remember reading one view that stood out to me, and it was of an Army vet, and he was saying how he had taken this Berkey device when he was in Iraq, and there was lots of kind of nuclear waste and swamp water. It was just like super nasty. And he thought, yeah, okay, we'll see how good this device is. And so he poured it in the top, went through the charcoal filtering system, poured it out, did a chemical analysis on it, and sure enough, it filtered out all of it. So you have essentially H2O. So I swear by this thing, and you can get various sizes and whatnot, but it's a really good resource. You know, what I like about that is that yes, it was an upfront cost, but you got to think about how many times you're going to the store and buying bottled water, and not only that, when the water gets shipped in these trucks, and you go through high temperature areas like Arizona or just wherever, or the truck's not well cooled because there really isn't a need to. And so all of this, pop and water and everything like sits out in the sun. Well, those aluminum cans that the soda is in leach heavy metals into it, just like it does with, canned goods, that you buy like soups and whatnot. And,
Yeah.
back in George Orwell's 1984, he talked about this. He said that the heavy metals from the foods that we eat, referring like the tin cans and whatnot, leach into your brain and lead to the effects of heavy metals, which is Alzheimer's and cognitive problems. And so we
Yeah.
see that from that. And so to finish my point, when you have water from these water bottles, the plastic leaches through the temperature as well. So yes, it's maybe was it crystal clear Springbrook water that's all organic and natural and da da da, but it's in a plastic bottle, and so that plastic is going to negatively affect it. So all the more reason to really push yourself that if you can invest a little bit up front, you're saving so much more money in the long run and having healthier water.
And you can use different types of methods to actually get some of the heavy metals, spirulina, chlorella, and stuff like that, um, to actually get the heavy metals out. The biggest one is what's the name of that stuff that we also use this? You can use to spray in our mouths and stuff to get uh
Zeolite.
yeah, that's it, zeolite. So zeolite is a big one, as well as cilantro. But it's another Food and Drug Administration trick. Another Food and Drug Administration trick is using aluminum foil. Please just throw that away. It's actually not good for you. Use parchment paper. You can actually wrap your foods up in parchment paper and just tuck it in. I wrap things like the way you wrap a burrito. You just wrap it on, put both sides in and roll it up, and you can wrap any food item that way. You can also bake with it. It's just as versatile, and it's less poisonous. But that's, you want to stay away from aluminum as much as possibly can. And you can detox yourself, and there's various ways all over the internet of how to detox yourself from heavy metals. So these are some of the things that we touched on about how to handle food and how to handle your body and things like that. And just bear in mind that it's your, and how they say, my body's my rules, and it is. It's like nothing could be further from the truth from that. So anything else you guys want to add, because we can wrap this up.
One last
I
thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just one really. My last fast fact for the day is, if you'll notice, you were talking to Blue about plastic bottles, but for water, is that there are expiration dates on that. They're best by sell by dates, and that's not because of the water. It's actually because of the plastic. Because if after a certain amount of time, there's just such a high amount of leached plastic into the water that the actual bottle starts to break down due to it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That was it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'll leave folks with my parting words with two more resources for people to check out. A guy by the name of Dr. Josh Axe, AXE, is very popular. He's got a good blog and fantastic YouTube channel. And he talks about everything, you name it. And then the other one that stands out is Joel Wallach, Wallach. And his product is called Youngevity, and this goes back to what Sue was mentioning earlier about the soil and how poorly nutritious our soil is now. What they found is about 100 years ago, when electricity began, um, people stopped needing to use coal and oil to furnish their home to keep it as warm with and lights and all of that sort of stuff. And so what would happen is when they would have fires in their backyard, or just in their house and wherever, they would take the ashes and the coal from that, and they would put that and sprinkle it on their gardens. And they stopped doing that practice once electricity came about. And so as a result of all of this, our soil from the food that we would eat and grow ourselves, mind you, and was organic, mind you, is what was extremely started to be malnourished, if you will, because they wouldn't let it sit for a while and refresh itself, and so they were using and essentially raping the soil. And then, interestingly enough, when Mount St. Helens erupted here where I am, just north in Washington, there's a huge cloud, huge plume that went over everywhere. And for the next 30 years, that there's been massive amounts of production that's just bloomed. And what they found is they correlated the ash from the mountain when it's sprinkled down onto all of these, fields and whatnot, that it replenished the soil. So the takeaway is that the food that we eat doesn't have nearly the amount of the nutrition that it used to because of the soil, and therefore supplementing with high quality supplements is just so critical for all of us.
Yeah.
So can't recommend those names that I mentioned enough.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think we wrap this up for until next week. So I want to thank Katie for giving us a platform to yap off everything that we want to talk about from A to Zinc. Okay, sorry, that was bad. And we want to thank Maria for allowing us to run with her channel here as well here for Heart's Mind Expression. We want to thank Evolve TV, and of course, if you want to actually think about, relaxing and having a great time and also being able to find clothes that exercise, I recommend Savvy Clothing Line. It's actually great when you want to work out, when you want to relax, when you want to go shopping, and it fits all bodies and size and types and shapes and everything. So Savvy Clothing Line, totally recommend it. And thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Lots of love to you all.